Hi, you're listening to Mindset Spelled with AI, a weekly tech podcast that is shaping what you know and think about AI. My name is David. I'm a journalist, a tech journalist, and entrepreneur. And with me here is, as always, an AI executive. Hi, Filip.
Hey, good to see you, David, again.
So, we have a big topic. We haven't seen each other, talked to each other in a while. Apple Intelligence. It's the
Yes.
umbrella term that we will be using for our today's discussion. And my tagline is like, "What went wrong, and is it really as bad as it seems?"
Yes. So you are a heavy iPhone and Apple user and like a big fan of the ecosystem. So maybe let's start with how do you feel about Apple Intelligence promise as a heavy Apple user?
Okay, let's go back to 2024, right? In 2024, there were a lot of rumblings around, oh, we have Google doing stuff with Gemini, we have OpenAI, month after month,
Yep.
bringing us new features to ChatGPT, introducing Sora, the video model. There were, Meta was doing a lot of stuff with Llama and kind of like doing different breakthroughs. And then there was like the sleepy giants kind of was the thing, like Amazon. But Amazon, as you correctly pointed out in previous episodes, built its bedrock and it's not doing as bad as it might seem. But then there was Apple, which kind of everyone was looking at, like, oh, okay, so there's like some problems with delivery at one point, because they were kind of like not the first ones to bring some features. And the second point was like, okay, there are a lot of questions around privacy, security with AI. How are they going to handle it? Maybe that's the reason why they're pushing back. I mean, back in terms of like staying behind. And so in June, WWDC came and they introduced a lot of features that were across the whole ecosystem, and it kind of made everyone calmer, I would say. Like a lot of commentators, analysts, tech journalists kind of said, oh, it is like not a one big feature. Like the biggest feature they introduced was Siri, like the new Siri, which was supposed to be super conversational, and a lot of features that are hidden in the operating system, but kind of makes sense. And the result is many of those promises are nowhere to be found on iPhones today. So that's where we are.
Yep. So is it a big of a disappointment for you?
It is, and frankly, not just for me. The biggest, I would say, I'm going to cite, or not cite, just like mention John Gruber, who's
Mm-hmm.
like a long-term Apple blogger on Daring Fireball. He written, and it like spoke very deeply to me. He has written this piece called "Something Is Rotten in the State of Cupertino," very very critical, and he basically said, like, we all fell victim to Apple, and even maybe
Mm-hmm.
Apple fell victim to itself, saying, oh, there are these features, we will deliver them. And it's very unlike of this company. Very rarely has it happened in the past that they even started promoting stuff that was maybe months, or let me correct myself, years away, and then even pushed it you know further.
Yep. So let's go one by one. So you mentioned several things which would probably be worth a deeper debate. So let's start with this umbrella term, because they call it Apple Intelligence, which when I first heard it was like, ah, that's genius. Like they managed to actually use two letters, which are AI, to like grab their own product. So the marketing department did a great job there, but I'm a little bit afraid that's where it stopped. So then, okay, so the issue with Apple Intelligence is that it doesn't give you any specific promise. So it's like an umbrella term which should bring you, and they in WDC, as you rightly mentioned, present it like a cocktail of different things which should be part of it. The problem is that that's not usually the way to build a good and fast to be released product. Because if you have too many different elements which need to come to under common umbrella, then you are torn with, I need to let that connecting, but the experience there is different, so I need to adjust that one. So it's very difficult to put a symphony of so many small pieces to be consistent. And I think that Apple is very keen on making things at least look consistent. They don't want to have like all things all over the place. So that's already standing in a way. What is worse is that in this attempt to make it an umbrella product, what they did, they delegated individual tasks to individual smaller teams to come up with the AI innovations themselves. And that's like a recipe for nightmare. Because if you don't have a common platform and everyone needs to like tweak it to their own local, of course they're gonna do like cut the corners to make it as easy for that environment. But as a result, then the umbrella thing does not work. So I think they realized after some time that they can't deliver on promised timelines because this fragmented everything and nothing. Like imagine if OpenAI has to release when both Sora, the image generation, the LLM, the deep research, everything is ready in the same way. It would take ages for them. So they are not ready for this continuous development. And I think that's a mistake. So they should not go that way. By the way, you are a user. So which of the features do you actually can use from the Apple Intelligence, where the promise at least come close to having something available?
As we are in Europe, none of the features.
Okay.
Because they're supposed to launch in April with iOS 18.4. There are some features that you can get your hands on in the beta, developer beta version, but it's kind of like not great in terms of there are only a couple of languages available, and as you know, it deeply is connected to which language you're using, because the flagship, I would say, features were like around text, summarizing text, better notification, better understanding your time, getting some context from your emails and stuff like that. So if you're speaking predominantly in languages that are not supported by Apple Intelligence, then you're basically stuck with, a good old iPhone without any AI, and you're basically relying for the AI features on the AI apps, right? ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and others.
So let me
Let
rephrase
me
the
ask you one
question.
thing regarding
Yeah.
what you said, because you said, okay, there's a lot of problems, undelivered things, and I remember you and we talked about like, okay, is the problem of basically creating the modules, or is it the problem integrating them? And if the problem you say would be like like creating the models, I would say, but Elon Musk and XAI were able to build Grok 3.0 in just a couple of months, and like the benchmarks for that model, and if you're using it, it's quite good. And Apple has the money, right? And then like integration is the problem, or like it's almost like in which part of the stack did the problem happen?
Okay. So as you rightly said, being a European user, you don't get that much of a sun from Apple Intelligence. But like, let's look at it from if you are a user, like English speaking user in US, right? So the features that they enabled are mainly around images and like clearing objects out of the images and kind of adjusting your photos. So that's one line. Then they tried to have a text summarizing things, but that were really bad to my understanding. Like it was giving either very banal summaries or summaries which are kind of pointless because are longer than the actual message provided or are not at the point at all, right? So to me, it looks like they really have an issue to create the components first place as well. Because with all the respect, it's not a rocket science now to build a summarizing tool. Like there is thousands of them out there, some better, some worse, but the performance of what we see in Apple Intelligence seems to be on a worse side of a spectrum. So why would a company like Apple with relatively unlimited budgets and a lot of talent be not able to do it? So I think that the issue is that there is no strong guidance, and I'm also a little bit afraid that this is like historically teams which have been working on, let's say, image editing have been now asked to add an AI feature on top of it. But yes, they understand the images and maybe how to edit it and how to do a good UI about editing the images, but do they understand how to do a good AI? And I think the competencies don't seem to be there. So I fully like get on board with your question. Shall they be building it first place? Shall they kind of focus on we need to have our own models, especially as like the open source is booming. Like there are a lot of models which you can take and out of the box would be better than what you see in Apple Intelligence. So it's a little bit of this a pride element as well. So not invented here phenomenon like we didn't make it, so we're not going to implement it because we have no control, not full control about how it's going to behave.
Two things that come to my mind. First is, so when you talk about, okay, there seems to be a problem on the base layer where it is like about building these foundational models which everything is built upon. This takes me back a couple years back when there was like this big report. I don't recall whether it was Wall Street Journal or the Bloomberg, and they were kind of looking back at the evolution of Siri, the voice assistant of Apple. So Apple was the first one, right? So they bought the whole company behind Siri, they integrated Siri, and it was kind of like a wow moment, right? Then very quickly, Amazon and Google kind of jumped on and basically very quickly built better voice assistants, right? And the reporting suggested that the problem was when it comes to training, the guardrails Apple set for its engineering team were so big they couldn't, move as fast as Amazon or Apple. Might be this the problem, the guardrails of the company, which is like really trying to, you know, stay true,
Yeah,
let's say, to security, privacy of the users?
it's kind of a problem, but I don't think so that's the primary problem. The primary problem is that the top management of Apple does not have a calibrated feeling for how good of the talent they have for AI. I think they vested it in the hands of certain kind of managers or let's say long-standing members of the team, but they didn't have a check on how well they are doing and how they are thinking. They let it probably on their own, having a lot of issues with iPhones in China and otherwise. So they probably have a lot of topics to discuss. So they said, okay, I'm not an AI expert. I have somebody who declares or is perceived as a AI expert, so I leave it up to them. And it was not probably the best bet. We're going to talk about it. There were even like managerial changes happening as a result, which is a clear sign of somebody was given a responsibility and didn't stand up for what was asked to do, right? So that's one thing. So if you don't have a good feeling for that you have a strong enough talent to make it happen, then it's easy to give a limitations which are unreasonable. And if the team is not strong enough, it didn't push back on that limitations. Because if I was supposed to train a model and I get the limitations that they are asked, I would say either you really think or somebody else has to do it. And maybe that even silently happened, that the really good ones decide like, okay, I can't possibly work because this is like no overlap with reality, what you're asking me to do. And there were some silent departures. I don't know. I don't remember like a major media coverage on like teams leaving Apple, but it could have happened that silently they moved to different projects or like they worked on. And I think that also Apple had this kind of a bitter feeling internally that anything super heavy on AI didn't fly and people didn't want to probably invest their careers into it. Just remember Apple Car, right? Like it was a big project predominantly about how to integrate AI into it because like the mechanical part of electric vehicle is very easy, right? So it's about like autonomous driving of that car. So it's fully AI thing. Didn't work. They have to scrap the project. Didn't happen. So I think that in Apple there was not a strong team which would like say yes, we're gonna go to the stars or go to the moon with this, and they didn't deliver on it. And the top management was kind of closing eye on it or like praying that this is going to work, but it didn't, and that it finally was too late and it backfired on them. So I think I wish that they kind of take a full reflection on this. I'm not sure if it's really happening because the full reflection would be also opening this idea of taking the external models. But now, David, if you remember, there was this moment when there was Sam Altman and Tim Cook on a dinner discussing OpenAI being used. So there obviously has been attempt. So what do you think? What are the reasons why these two things just didn't click in? Why do you think Apple never jumped on taking the external models?
It wasn't just a dinner with Sam Altman. There were meetings and closing deals, or supposed to be closing deals with Google, Tim Cook with Sundar Pichai, talking about Gemini, including that as kind of like a backup model or backup plan. And none of that came to fruition. Basically, just the US users of Apple Intelligence say they can use ChatGPT if they switch. They can ask the ChatGPT, chatbot, to jump in and give a better answer or other answer than Siri is doing. But Gemini is nowhere to be found, and also other models were promised, because they kind of said at WWDC this is not going to be just ChatGPT, but we're working on including other models. To be honest, I don't know what happened, what fell apart. But to my second point, which is kind of hinting on where might be the problem, that the problem might be also kind of like a political problem between these big tech companies, is that if you look at some of the startups that are doing quite well and are using open source model to build upon something else, let's take Sesame, one of my favorite startups that has come up in recent months. They have a really lifelike voice model that they built. Anyone can try it. It's really amazing how well it responds, how it mimics voice of normal people. This startup was recently did get funding from Sequoia, is almost valued at $1 billion, and this was built on Meta's Llama models. But Apple has been trashing Meta Zuckerberg for years. Now, how would that look if they suddenly said, we're going to build this we're going to take this large open source library and use it? First of all, I'm not sure actually if the licensing of Llama would allow it to do just without consulting. I think
Yep.
because they don't have the fully open source license, they would have to come to Meta and basically talk to them.
Yes, they would
Possibly,
have to have a consent from them, because if you have more than 1 million users, you'll need to
yeah.
have a consent from Meta.
Yes, and also possibly talk to them. And I think that was a big no-no for the
Yes.
current management. So they're stuck with either going with some, commercial models, paying for them, I guess, or building their own, because the largest open source is a no for them just because of some history.
That's a
So
very
it's
good point.
so for me, it's like it shouldn't be an issue if you looked at it purely from the point of view, does this come together? Because it really goes together so well, right? One big tech company doesn't have a hardware uh, division, don't build hardware, but they've built this really good open source model, and the second one has really good hardware and doesn't have its own model. So that relationship, you could see logically how that could work nicely together. But because these two have been fighting for the past few years about privacy, security, it's a no-go. It's fascinating.
It is a good point, and I never thought about it that way. But you're right. Like the moment that you say, okay, maybe you should go for an external models, you have two options. Either you're going to license a paid one, but it's going to be pretty expensive given the number of the users, and everybody knows like you have a money, so they'll be not giving you a discount. Like if Apple comes to buy a license for AI, you maybe give it a premium, not a discount, because you know that maybe I don't even know what everything else will happen in future, so let's give it an extra charge. So that's true. And with the open source, funny enough, when these decisions have been made, Llama was the best open source. Now it's not true anymore, but the other alternatives are not that shiny either, because it's like DeepSeek from China, probably not a good not a good horse you wanna bet on globally. And then like you could go with Mistral or something else, but then probably again, this might be a bit political as well, because every other player is maybe too small to guarantee a long-term sustained development of the models, and that you kind of integrate something which. But I want to say one more thing. So this is exactly one of the reasons why I think, I'm sorry to say, this might disappoint you and similar Apple fans, but this is going to get even worse, because the development in the AI environment is going so fast that every 3 to 5 months a completely new leader is being like emerging for some time, and then again disappearing again, and a new one comes. So I think they are also in this limbo of, okay, if it takes me a year to develop a feature, by the time I'm going to develop it, whatever I bet on is not guaranteed and is more or less guaranteed not to be the best of class, right? So I think this is a little bit of why people were amazed that they announced that the Apple Intelligence will be not ready until 2026 and maybe like late 2026. And the reason for that is exactly this. So you start working on something and then it becomes obsolete in your hands and you need to go for something else. And if you don't have your own team who is following the trends and who is like building for, or maybe like building with a partner in advance, like, hey, you're going to release a new Mistral model. Can we be the primary use of it? And can you give us a beta before you publicly launch it? They would need something like that in order to stay relevant, but there's nowhere to be seen.
Yeah, and it's in so that's just like one part of the problem, right? Like we're kind of talking philosophically, but to take it back to something like concrete. Let's talk about Siri, right? So Siri has been this big promise, like I would say one of the biggest promises of WWDC, where Apple, by some regard, you could say they were the first ones to actually come up with an assistant that could be perceived as an AI agent. In 2024, they laid out the plan how this could be the one biggest touch point of Apple users to not just communicate with, a chatbot or to get some help regarding, writing emails, looking at the calendar, but also booking, so going on the internet, searching for things, also connecting with other apps which would connect to Siri and do stuff. And again, another big area where this is nowhere to be found. Probably I would say it's a really hard job, but again, their problem is they have announced it will come, then they have delayed it, and by the latest reports, it might be here, not even by 2026, but sometimes in 2027. Again, like those promises that were made. But we've seen recently Amazon also introduced Alexa Plus. They were supposed to launch it in April. They're supposed to, and it's like, so if you listen or follow some tech journalists in the US, as I have been, we're recording April 4th, and for the last couple of days, the only, I would say, like repeating post I'm seeing from these journalists is like, Alexa Plus is not here yet. Alexa Plus is not here yet. And just recently, I think yesterday, came the announcement, okay, we will start shipping Alexa next week or in the coming days, but it will lack a couple of features that we promised. They will come 2 months later, and some other ones that, again, we promised will come later in the year, which tells me that probably it's really not as easy as it seems. So not just building, right? Like when I said, let's build Sesame, and Sesame is like this really good model in itself. You can converse, right? That's probably something you can build with a small team. But suddenly, taking it, integrating it into like a bigger ecosystem in a platform, and it has to be like almost like spotless in terms of like not making too many mistakes. Probably we're not there in terms of like where the technology is. Like that's my understanding, but I would love your take on it.
Yes, and I think I would agree on most of the things which you said in the umbrella of saying we are not there. But let me maybe give you a bit of a reasoning for that as well. So, what many people don't realize, we talked about it in mAIndset, I think 2 or 3 episodes back, but what many people don't realize is that the tools like ChatGPT or Claude, they are not designed for any specific use cases. They are general use tools, and you as the owner take full responsibility what is going to happen with that. So OpenAI is not giving you any promise on how accurately it will book a flight for you. It's not giving you any promise on if it's going to automate your web crawling or whatever. It can do the things, but you are in control. Now, look at Apple Intelligence, the way that they are trying to doing. They are trying to promise specific use cases, right? They demonstrate it, and then they find out, oops, it doesn't work the way that we demoed it or like tease it. And then they feel bounded to that use case. So they try to optimize for that use case so it works. But of course, optimizing for one use case makes you vulnerable to 20 other use cases which you didn't optimize for. So I think they are in a wrong way of doing this, because they promised specific use cases and the technology is not there to give a hard promise on specific use cases. So they are in this, okay, how much of a trouble we can still weather in order to release it and not to be on the issue. And the other thing which I think Apple specifically has a problem with is they try to build things which are only able to do things which they allow them to do. In other words, like, they don't want to have a generic tool which can do anything for you. They're going to limit, okay, if it goes to book something, it has to do it in the way that Apple thinks it should be doing. And they are doing it to prevent the scam or like a negative PR coming out of it. Because if they make the gene too powerful, then it will be like, there will be people who will be nasty and like cheeky things doing, and it will backfire on them. But this control about, okay, I want to give you an agent, but the agent can only do ABC because I tested that ABC is safe to be done. That is going to be very difficult to keep the track with. So they either have to realize that I'm not promising use cases, and you take full responsibility for that, or if I do promise use cases, they will be falling more and more behind.
Interesting. So that takes us basically to the point where we need to ask the question, like, is the company in big trouble, and what we think will they do or what they should do? Because those are the big questions, and I know those are like speculations. We have some hints from Apple. You already mentioned this, there happened the change at the top of the AI team, where John Gianandrea, who came from Google's DeepMind, was changed by Mike Rockwell, who led the Apple Vision Pro team. There were some other people who came in the last few months from the Apple Vision team, like Kim Vorath. So there has been some shifts around, and some acknowledgement that this wasn't the best approach forward. And I'll just add, like, from my point of view, is like, just give access to those other models, and I'm okay with it. Like, I will sign it. Like, just give me, because like I see how I have the device and how I have these other models, and the integration is like not deep enough. And I would be willing to try, like, like, for example, giving access to email, let's say.
Yep. So my answer to your question is, to this big flying question, is it like a deadly sin for Apple to have Apple Intelligence this way? I would answer no, but I think that Apple will survive as a kind of a black passenger without a ticket to ride. And I'll try to elaborate till the end of this discussion, but just to jump on a few things which you mentioned around the managerial changes. So ultimately, what was happening in Apple Intelligence, it was being too Apple and too little intelligence, right? That was the problem. So replacing it with like a senior Apple person, not even being responsible for AI before by itself, doesn't sound to me like a good quick fix, to be honest. So maybe it's an interim solution and they are looking for like a superstar from external environment who will come and save the day. But if they believe they solve the problem of not having, let's say, innovative enough AI leadership, and replacing it with a person who is like long-lasting warrior of Apple, not even done AI himself before, I don't think so this is going to work. So if Tim Cook thinks this is like a final solution, he will be unhappy to find out it's not, and he will need to make yet another change, and let's see what happens in between. So that's on a kind of a managerial versus cultural side, because what I really think what they need is they need to allow their own employees to use the external models. I think they even forbid them to use any external models. And if you're not experimenting with the latest and greatest, you are hardly going to build something which is good enough to stand in a competition. So they need a management which is going to say, okay, you are free to think about external possibilities as long as they meet these criteria, which we agree on. I don't think so it's happening. So that brings me to the point that I believe it's not going to get better anytime soon. And when it comes to Siri, like, I don't know what's your point of view, but I think it's already having such a negative connotation that a lot of people, it's a laugh joke. for many people. So it's probably to the point that they should probably retire the brand and start with something else. It would be relatively dramatic because it was the first assistant, if I remember correctly. So it's a legend, but it's a legend which is not like living up to the promise. So maybe time to let the legend die. What is your point of view on like a Siri and a branding?
That's a good question. I don't think they are going to do that. Like I don't think that's the Apple way. And in terms of like the disappointment, I'm not sure there's like real deep disappointment with like the new Siri, right? So there's like an overall disappointment with Siri. But it's not like, oh, we expected it and the new Siri is better. And we already kind of had this discussion back after WWDC. And I think the common understanding was, yeah, Siri is not a bad name. And if it will become better, it's going to be fine. But like in terms of like brand damage, the last year or last 6-7 months hasn't done anything worse for the brand than it was before. If in June the common, I would say, like even my take was I wouldn't change the brand, then with the arrival of like new better Siri, I probably wouldn't change it now.
Yeah, if I was in Apple, what I would do is this long-lasting marketing trick. So you can let the old die by introducing new one as an alternative, and then all of a sudden don't push for the old alternative anymore. And it looks like people selected the new one, and therefore you retire the old one, right? Because if you remember, also Apple has this special button on MacBooks and so on. So it was introduced and then silently disappeared because it was not loved. Change of the keyboards and so they have a history of we introduced something, we didn't say it's bad, but next time we bring an alternative and you forgot about the previous one. So I would say bringing another person, another persona, not Siri. I don't want to even put the names because I don't dare to say what the names should be. But another sister or brother to the Siri would be a way around that. But then the sister or brother would have to be much, much better. So if they can make it, then they can probably retire it. And what would be great about it, all of a sudden, people would not talk about if Siri is good or bad, but would try to compare, and you will be exactly where you want to be, right? So if you introduce a new alternative, they would say, okay, I prefer this new one. I want to still stick with a Siri. And you can have the crowd go. But I don't believe that that's the way they are thinking about it, but that's what I would do. All right. So just before you have anything to
Coming
comment
back
on
to my
that?
question, I really would love to get your take on it. So you have these powerful Apple devices, right? And you have this notion of the big company that wants to develop its own models, and it's kind of stuck in between doing that, having a deal with someone else, looking at open source. That's kind of an icky way. But like if I put you in charge, right? Like let's say, Filip,
Ooh.
now you're in charge. You have like a couple of months to get this done. What would be the big decisions to need to happen, and would you stay closed or would you open up?
So first of all, they need an external AI leader. I don't know if you meant me to be that one. If you did, thanks. I probably would not aspire for to be the one. Would not dare to think about myself. But they would need an external superstar to also recover the credit because they are also losing a credit. Now imagine you're an AI engineer. Do you really want to go for Apple now at this point of a time? You're a little bit hesitant, right? It's not really like a magnetic place to go now for the best AI talent. So you would need a superstar which will be both the magnet for the kind of a beacon for our industry and like a seal of approve that this is going to work because it works somewhere else. So that would be my first move. My second move would be that I would focus on delivering capabilities, not use cases. So I would say, okay, we're going to give you a tool which can do this and it can match, I don't know what ChatGPT is promising to do. Or we're going to insource ChatGPT and this way, like onboard whatever ChatGPT do, right? But obviously, they are too late to the game to develop their own model. So if anybody in Cupertino still hopes to have their own A1 or whatever model they're going to come with, it's too late. That's no way they can make it. Even the frenetic effort that, which you mentioned, Elon Musk did in order to get to the group, he could have done it like a year ago. Now he would be too late to the game already. He wouldn't be able to do it even now. So That's the other thing. They'll probably also on a wrong side of a history when it comes to what type of model to use. So because now it looks like reasoning models will be the way to go. So if they are not thinking about the reasoning model to be the backbone of it, they are already missing another round of changes that they will have to do, because it's going to be reasoning models later on. And I think that they need to kind of close the eye and throw some money into the jackpot for like getting the external solution working. So they need to invest into, like, think about it. OpenAI is investing billions just to get the compute, right? Elon Musk invested billions just to get the things rolling. Llama investing billions. So unless you're going to invest billions into something, it's not going to be at par. It's not only about the money, but like you can't win the race with having no horse and no food for the horse either, right? So I think they'll need to kind of set aside significant budget, something like what Mark Zuckerberg did with this metaverse. So it was not a very successful example. So I don't want to take that to be the role model, but something like that, like having a strategic initiative, throw a lot of money on it, have an external person lead it. That would be my way out of the problem.
Interesting. So if you were to bet, I don't know if you're a betting person actually or not, what would you say where the company is going to be end of this year?
Yep. So I'm gonna come back to my teased kind of thinking about if this is a deadly sin or not. Let me start with saying that I don't believe that we will have an Apple Intelligence which is anything what people hope for until end of this year, 2025. I don't believe so. Whatever will come will be maybe like limiting the damage that they are now sustaining. But I still believe that we will end the year 2025 with Apple Intelligence being nowhere at par with other intelligence tools that are around. Now, does it hurt the company? So they will be hammered for it on every investor calls, on every tech reviews and everything. With every new launch of the product, which they have to do regularly, so this is like a bad thing for them. They have to launch new iPhones, they have to launch new iPads, they have to launch new MacBooks. With every release, they're gonna get back the questions. Okay, nice hardware again. When will the software kind of match the hardware? When will we have intelligence as well? And they need to find an answer to that. And the answer probably should be for them that they're gonna like partner or license an external model. They should go through and like swallow the pride to do that, because, and that's the other part of it, even if they don't, they can still survive. But how they're going to survive as like a black passenger on a train? So they will end up with people using external apps on the iPhones. And what they don't realize that, okay, this will not get to the point that you will start thinking about Google Pixel or other devices if you have your iPhone. I don't think so that it will get to that point. But you will lose a lot of revenue from potentially could have been serving the AI services. So you will get in a lot of disadvantage. And if Google manages, for instance, to get the revenue, then they have a chance to strike back on the hardware as well. Now they don't have a chance because they don't want to. But if they're going to have a super strong AI stream, then they will have more resources to think about how maybe make the pixels and other devices more prominent. So ultimately, I don't think so they are life endangered. This is not going to kill Apple, but it's putting them in a very difficult position to keep the revenue growth, because the hardware division itself is not having a good times, and they miss on a large opportunity of services or fees they could have collected for the AI.
Okay, so that leaves us. I'll just give you my 2 cents regarding that note, and that would be still smartphone seems to be the best way to experience AI in many ways for a regular person, right? Like probably you wouldn't be able to do your industrial production, what you do at Commensol with just like a bunch of smartphones. So and while until they keep doing this to the best of their knowledge, they're kind of okay. I'm not saying safe, okay. And unless some competitor comes with like a really deep integrated AI functions, which even Google hasn't delivered in Pixel, to be honest, right? Like cleanup function in photos, yes, it's better than in AI in Apple. Even Samsung's cleanup seems to be better than Apple's in photos. But when it comes to like summaries, they're kind of not in the like everywhere, like Apple promise. So kind of like Apple promise, like anywhere you have like a text editor, you can do the summaries. Samsung, Google hasn't done it, right? So it's like there hasn't been. I'm waiting for this year for them to push deeper these integrations, but still that's going to be, end of 2025 when if that's delivered, or even like next year. So there is kind of some leeway, but I would agree with you and say they're not doomed yet, but the time is like, it's really getting close to that limit where you could say like, okay, it's like you just missed it, right? So I guess we can end it here. I feel like we've looked at the topic from every angle. If not, be sure to come to the mindsetpodcast.com website. Tell us, send us email at ideas@mindsetpodcast.com. So that's mindset spelled with AI. You can also vote for the topics we will discuss in the future on our website, mindsetpodcast.com. And that's all for this episode. And thank you, Filip, for having this discussion with me.
It was a pleasure as always, and I really look forward to what will be upvoted as our next topic.
So you can find Mindset in your favorite podcast app, on YouTube. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn. Be sure to check out our website, mindsetpodcast.com, spelled with AI, and send us your ideas at ideas@mindsetpodcast.com. Thank you, Filip, and bye. Till next time.
See you.